The silence in our living room had become a physical entity, something heavy and suffocating that sat between Mark and me like an uninvited guest. For weeks, we hadn't spoken about the money. It was the big project, he called it, an investment opportunity in a tech startup run by an old college friend. I called it our future, the down payment on the house we'd spent 3 years saving for, the safety net for the family we were trying to start. I had watched the balance drop from our joint account with a sense of dread that felt like drowning in slow motion. First, 5,000. Then, 20. Finally, the rest of it. Gone. Every penny of our hard-earned security vanished into his friend's bank account, leaving us with nothing but empty promises and a bank statement that made my stomach turn. I watched him from the kitchen doorway as he sat at the table, scrolling through his phone with a smug, distant look on his face. He didn't know I had seen the messages. He didn't know I had spent the last 3 nights digging into his friend's business profile, uncovering a paper trail that led directly to a series of shell companies and a bankruptcy filing from 6 months ago. He thought I was the naive wife who would just weep when the money didn't return. He thought I was still the woman who believed his desperate, frantic excuses about market volatility and temporary delays. He was wrong. I wasn't weeping anymore. I was calculating. I walked into the kitchen, the floorboards groaning under my weight, and set a thick, cream-colored envelope on the table directly in front of him. He didn't look up immediately, his thumb still hovering over the screen. "Not now, Sarah," he muttered, his voice laced with that familiar, patronizing exhaustion he used whenever I tried to discuss our finances. "I'm waiting for an update from Greg. We're close, I swear. Just a few more weeks and you'll see." I didn't pull the envelope back. I didn't say a word. I just waited, my heart drumming a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had spent hours at the print shop, hours with a lawyer who looked at me with a mix of pity and professional detachment, and hours composing myself in the mirror. I had reached a point where the anger had cooled into something cold, sharp, and lethal. I reached out and tapped the top of the envelope, a sharp, rhythmic sound that finally made him freeze. Slowly, he looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, his face gaunt from the weeks of stress he'd been hiding, or pretending to hide. He frowned, glancing from my face to the document. "What is this?" he asked, his voice losing its arrogant edge. I leaned down, resting my palms on the cool granite of the island, and met his gaze with a look he couldn't possibly misinterpret. "It's not an update from Greg," I whispered, my voice barely audible but steady as steel. "Open it, Mark, and don't bother calling the bank, because I already did." His hands trembled as he reached for the envelope. As he ripped the seal, the papers inside slid halfway out, the bold black header of the legal firm catching the light of the overhead lamp. His face went ghostly pale, his eyes darting across the first paragraph, then the second, as the reality of what I had done finally crashed into him. He looked up at me, his mouth opening to speak, but before he could utter a word, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a notification from the bank, an alert that my personal, private account, the one he didn't know existed, had just been emptied by a source I hadn't authorized. My blood ran cold, and I realized with sudden, sickening clarity that he hadn't just given our money away. He had stolen mine, too. The silence in the room shifted, turning from heavy to jagged. Mark didn't even look at the divorce papers anymore. His eyes were glued to my phone, which was still lighting up with notification after notification. The pinging sound was rhythmic, almost mocking, tracking the systematic drainage of my grandmother's inheritance. The money I'd kept in a separate account precisely for moments like this, for my own autonomy, for my own escape. "You didn't," I whispered, the words catching in my throat as I lunged for the device. Mark snatched it first, his reflexes sharper than I'd ever seen them. He didn't run. He didn't even stand up. He just sat there, a predator cornered in his own home, scrolling through the transaction logs with a disturbing, vacant fascination. A slow, cruel smile began to spread across his face, replacing the panic that had been there just seconds ago. "I didn't give it to Greg, Sarah," he said, his voice dropping into a register I barely recognized, low, raspy, and devoid of the performative guilt he'd been wearing for weeks. Greg was a lie. I needed you to think I was a failure. I needed you to think I was stupid so you wouldn't look for the truth. My pulse thundered in my ears. I reached across the table, grabbing the edge of the granite island so hard my knuckles turned white. What are you talking about? Where is the money, Mark? Where is all of it? He stood up then, towering over the table, the divorce papers sliding off the surface and fluttering to the floor like discarded confetti. He tossed my phone onto the table between us. It was dead. He'd hit the power button before handing it back. The money is gone, Sarah. It's been moved through enough layers that even the best forensic accountant you could hire with that settlement money would spend 3 years just finding the first trailhead. You think you're smart for bringing those papers? You're just a woman who decided to file for divorce on the very day she lost her entire net worth. I felt the room tilt. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was surgical. He had dismantled my security, my independence, and my legal leverage in one fell swoop. I reached into my pocket, feeling for the small, hard key I'd taken from his jacket earlier that morning. The key to the locker at the bus station where I'd hidden my passport, my hard drive, and the physical evidence of his actual illegal enterprise. If he knew about the money, did he know about the locker? You think you've ruined me? I asked, forcing my voice to remain steady, though my knees were shaking. You think taking the money makes me weak? I've been recording you since the day you mentioned Greg's name, Mark. Every phone call, every meeting at the cafe, every time you bragged about how easy it was to manipulate the little woman. Mark's face hardened. The mask of the loving husband dropped completely, leaving behind a stranger with cold, dark eyes. He took a step toward me, his shadow stretching across the floor, long and distorted. You've been recording me? He repeated, his tone deceptively soft. He reached into his own pocket and pulled out a small, metallic device, a frequency scanner. It hummed in his hand, blinking with a steady, aggressive red light. I know, Sarah. I've known for a month. That's why you haven't actually caught anything on those tapes. You've been recording hours of static and white noise. He took another step, closing the distance until I could smell the stale coffee and expensive cologne on his sweater. My heart stopped. I reached behind me, my fingers brushing the handle of the drawer where I kept the kitchen knives, but he caught my wrist before I could pull it open. His grip was like a vice, crushing the bones in my arm as he leaned in, his breath hot against my ear. The problem isn't that you're leaving, he whispered, his grip tightening until I whimpered in pain. The problem is that you're going to be the one who takes the fall for where all that money actually went. The papers you signed? They aren't just for a divorce, are they? I hope you read the fine print on the asset declaration forms I swapped into that envelope while you were in the shower this morning. I stared at him, horror dawning on me. My hands went numb as I realized what he had done. Just then, the front door rattled, and the heavy thud of boots echoed in the hallway. 3 silhouettes appeared against the frosted glass of the entryway, their heavy flashlights slicing through the darkness of our home, and I knew, in the absolute certainty of a dying breath, that they weren't here for him. They were here for me. The flashlights hit the living room with the force of a physical blow, blinding me as the front door was kicked wide open. The wood splintered with a scream of tortured metal, and before I could even draw a breath to scream, the room was swarming with tactical gear and tactical indifference. "Federal agents! Get on the ground! Now!" Mark didn't hesitate. He dropped to his knees with a theatrical grace, hands behind his head, his face a mask of practiced, trembling innocence. "She's the one," he choked out, his voice cracking with a perfect, sickening cadence of fear. "I tried to stop her. I tried to tell her the investments weren't legal, but she wouldn't listen. She said we needed the money, and she took it all." I stood paralyzed, the air trapped in my lungs like broken glass. I looked at the lead agent, a woman with eyes as cold as a winter gravesite, and then down at the papers still scattered on the floor. The asset declaration form. My signature was at the bottom, right under a clause that effectively liquidated every digital asset in my name and transferred it into a crypto wallet I didn't recognize, under a name I'd never seen before. He hadn't just stolen the money, he'd framed me as the architect of the entire laundering scheme. "Sarah Miller," the agent barked, stepping toward me with zip ties ready. "You're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit tax evasion. Anything you say." "He's lying!" I shouted, the sound raw and jagged. I spun toward Mark, who was looking up at the agents with a teary-eyed expression of heartbreak. "You bastard! You switched the documents! You've been planning this since the second we got married." Mark didn't even look at me. He just kept his eyes on the agent. "She's been unstable for months. The gambling, the investments she claimed were hers. I didn't know how to stop her without losing everything. I thought if I just went along with it, maybe she'd get bored." The agent grabbed my arm, twisting it behind my back with a practiced, brutal motion. The plastic zip ties bit into my skin, tight enough to cut off circulation. As they dragged me toward the door, I caught a glimpse of Mark's face. The tears were gone. The terror was gone. He was watching me with a look of profound, chilling relief. The look of a man who had just successfully offloaded a ticking bomb onto the person who trusted him most. "Wait," I gasped, digging my heels into the hardwood. "Check his phone. The browser history, the cloud backups, the hidden folders. It's all there. He has the keys to the offshore accounts. He's the one who wired the funds to the Caymans." Mark sighed, a long, weary sound. "I already wiped my devices, Sarah. I'm a victim too. Look at the bank statements. Every single transfer was authorized by her personal biometric key. I never even touched the computer." He reached into his pocket, my heart stopped, and pulled out a small, familiar object. It was my thumb drive, the one I had been hiding in the hollowed-out book on the nightstand, the one containing the real evidence, the recorded conversations, and the proof of his shell companies. My pulse turned to ice. He hadn't just taken the money, he had neutralized my only defense. He tossed the drive toward the agent, who caught it in midair. "She tried to hide this when you guys pulled up," Mark said quietly. "I managed to take it from her. I didn't want it to be destroyed. I wanted the truth to come out." The agent looked at the drive, then back at me. She didn't look at the files. She didn't plug it into a laptop. She just looked at me with a pity that burned worse than the handcuffs. "We've seen this 1,000 times, ma'am. The victim card is a classic." As they shoved me through the doorway and into the freezing night air, I felt the world closing in. I was being tossed into a patrol car, the metal cold against my cheek, when I saw him walk out onto the porch behind the officers. He stood there, leaning against the doorframe, watching as they slammed the cruiser door shut. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and tapped the screen once. My phone, the one he had taken, lit up on the passenger seat next to the arresting officer. It vibrated once, then twice. A message appeared on the lock screen, bright and clear in the darkness, visible through the window. It wasn't from the bank. It was a text from an unsaved number, containing a single photo. A live feed from the camera inside the bus station locker. The locker was empty. My passport was gone. My documents were gone. And standing in front of the open locker door, holding my life in his hands, was the one person I had trusted even more than Mark. The interior of the cruiser smelled of stale coffee and industrial-strength disinfectant, but all I could smell was the phantom scent of my own impending doom.